Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Legalize it.
Coming, how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, great, Barry, a reefer.
Hi, and welcome back to the Karma Koala podcast. And on this episode, I'm talking to a slightly cooler Europe than Jakarta today. And I'm talking to Sita Schubert. She's the managing director, ComOp Europe, and also the founder of the European Medical Cannabis Association. And we're basically just going to talk about the Medical Cannabis Association, what it does in Europe, but then also, as we just said in the preamble, have a talk about what is or isn't happening in the medical cannabis space with regard to regulatory advancements, shall we say. Sita, thanks for taking time to talk to us on the Karma Koala. Welcome to the show. First, maybe a little bit of background about the company that you run first, and then we'll move on to the association.
Thank you so much, Sean, for being invited to this podcast, which I think is a very big honor, looking on all the people who already participated. So thank you so much for that. Of course, I have to excuse my, as we say, Dinglish, which is a German English.
It's very good. Your English is better than my German and probably better than my English.
Yeah, and maybe better than the Spanish of both of us. Yeah. I think from my side, I'm a fully trained lawyer, and I went then to the international consultancy and took then my path to the pharmaceutical industry. Yeah, then I was managing the German affiliate in Austria for a Italian pharmaceutical company for more than 12 years. And then when I left the company, I established my own consulting company and a law company. So for pharma and biotech, and my company is introducing international pharmaceutical companies to Germany. And this is where I get in contact with Cannabis in 2017, with Tilray to establish them. And here the Cannabis take the root. And in 2019, I thought it is important to have a representation in Brussels in order to see that there will be upcoming regulations, cannabis regulations coming, where I think we need to be part of the process instead of watching it. And so we have established in Brussels the European Medicinal Cannabis Association.
With your consultancy practice, are you still practicing law, or you're
Yes.
just a lawyer who
Yes.
has a consultancy?
No. I have both. I have a law company, the consultancy with for pharma, biotech, and cannabis, and I have also a little pharma company. Yeah.
And when you're practicing law, are you practicing are you licensed just to practice in Germany, or are you practicing throughout Europe?
No, we are only bound to Germany because this is where we get the approval, and this is where law attorney in Germany is basically considered to be in Germany, except they have made another law education, for example, in England. Then you might also practice in England. But basically, if you have all your education in Germany, you stay in Germany.
You stay in Germany. So I mean, let's just start with your law practice. So you did some work for Tilray in 2017. I mean, have you found that there's been, even though there's the federal election coming up and there's some questions about regulation and legalization coming up in Germany, have you found that your law practice has picked up with lots of new clients, both local and overseas?
Yes, of course, because I think, being in the pharmaceutical business, you already need a kind of legal understanding. Regulatory is, as you, of course, are aware, is complex. It's always bound to regulations, to German one, but of course, being part of the European Union, of the European regulations. And so I think it's definitely an advantage to be, trained in law for that. So I think through my whole life, it was always very good to understand what the regulations are about, or what is upcoming, or or how to deal with regulations. Because first you have just words, but you have to fill it with life, and also with experience in order, to find a best practice situation, which is also in the sense of client, but also not ignoring the regulatory pathways. So I think this is absolutely crucial. Yeah, yeah. I found it very beneficiary. And yeah, also for the setup of for example, for the association, we did not spend any legal costs because
No,
I
well,
have
that's
made
always helpful, isn't it? Yeah. I mean,
the statutes for the association, etc. Yeah.
so with regard to business in Germany at the moment, obviously there's a few questions ahead in the future. Are you finding that inward investors and local investors are feeling still pretty positive about the German market? Or is there, I mean, I keep seeing press releases that imply that companies don't seem particularly perturbed about putting their footprint in Germany at the moment, prior to the federal election. I mean, is that how you're feeling?
No, to be honest, I don't feel so, because we have a steady growing situation in Germany. If you consider that we have a product as a medicinal product on the market, as a magistral preparation, which gained from zero to, I think, presently about 300 millions, or close to 300 millions. So I think this is a very sustainable business. I think Germany made it very well that to take the medicinal path and also to regulate the reimbursement. So I think here the patient access was, I think, crucial for that. And I see the business steadily growing. The point is, what kind of business model you have in mind. So if you think about recreational, of course, this is now presently, let me say, under some austerity measures looking at the next election. But we also see that if the Conservative Party will rule, and this is expected, they will not have a majority. So they will need to have a coalition either with the Social Democrats or with the Green Party, who are, of course, a strong favor of the recreational business as well. So I can imagine that they will go for the model system, which is also accompanied by scientific proof. And I think then we will see how things are developing. But of course, also being a lawyer, it's not easy just to withdraw legislation. You need majorities and sometimes even more. So I think there is a society discussion ongoing. I do not have, a kind of opinion to that. Of course, for me, the medicinal cannabis access for patient is the crucial one, and this is not endangered because also the Conservative Party is absolutely backing that. So I do not see here, and any kind of attempts from the health insurances to restrict that has been refused by our health technology assessment body, the GBA. So all doctors can prescribe, and it is basically also reimbursed. So I think the situation in Germany is within the best in Europe at present.
Oh, without a doubt. And with regard to that professional services surrounding the industry, I mean, it's early days yet, but up to this point, I've only ever been aware of, say, half a dozen lawyers in Germany who can take the time to practice mainly in cannabis law. Are you seeing a growth because of less of these fears about the future? Are you seeing a growth in professional services, law, consultancy, tax-based services, HR, etc. in Germany? Do you see that support system beginning to grow?
Oh, yes, I do. Absolutely. Because I think at the end, it's a new industry. And of course, every new industry is also attracting people to look into it. And I think looking back from my perspective, I learned unbelievable lot over the last years, exchanging with authorities, with ministries, with finding joint pathways with supervising authorities and establishing clients in that field. So I think it was a very big learning process, but it was also a very close process for both parties, also from a governmental side. And I see, of course, also that consultancy business is growing. It was a long time, of course, very difficult because we did not have any ordinances. We had the law, but how to use it or how shall it be understood is complex. I think also the present draft for the medicinal cannabis legislation, what we have now, and also for the recreational, is presently very bureaucratic. We have here also the first statements from the Association of Judges who see that it is
I
very
read that
complex.
recently by the German Business Association
Yeah,
newsletter, which is very good. Actually, one of the best newsletters on the planet, actually.
exactly. Yeah. I think that the way to decriminalize it is the right one, but I think in how to deal with it for present as a society which is not so well prepared, I think in being convinced to it, I think here there must be done much more for the future, explaining the situation and also the situation how it is. But as I say, this is, I think, left to a lot of people who are very engaged in that field and who are doing their work.
And for you, I'm beginning to see, two levels operating in Germany, and maybe from the outside, it's still a little bit difficult to understand how that works. But you have the federal parliament, the Bundestag, writing the legislation, but the provinces seem to be allowed to make certain decisions. Is that just on recreational cannabis, or does that apply to medical cannabis as well?
I think it applies to several. I think we have to see, we have federal and regional levels, and we have a very clear distinction who is doing what. So something like public health in general is done, of course, federal, because it is even done on a European legislation by guidelines. Yeah. But I think how to do it in several ways, it is decided on a regional level, also considering the specifications of the situation in the region as well. So we have like 32 supervising authorities in the 16 Bundesländer. And of course, they have different ways to deal with it, which is not always beneficial because some companies feel, like disadvantaged because they think another area is making maybe for competitors better decisions. If this is really the case, I don't know. Because let me say, if you make it there, you make it everywhere. So if you apply to the more stricter situation, you are ready for any other situation as well. If you find maybe, let me say, a softer solution, you might be hampered as soon as you enlarge your business. So I think this is on the company side to understand what is for them the favorable one. And I prefer honestly to the first one. If you make it there, you make it everywhere. And then you can grow and flourish your business instead of being always having a hiccup because you cannot continue because now you're facing an issue which all the others have already solved and not your company. So I think this is, the situation, how a company shall decide what is better for their vision. But as you also say, sometimes if it is more difficult, you might have also a better marketplace for that, not being so easy followed. So it is, I think, a kind of, having regulatory competition law, etc. So this is also a little bit a mixture of all of that.
And in terms of the market growing in Germany, as you said, one of your first jobs was, as I mentioned earlier, was Tilray back in 2017. How do you see it balancing out between overseas companies and homegrown German companies in the medical market? I mean, to me, as an outsider at the moment, I'm seeing a lot more names that I recognize from Canada and the US in the German market rather than homegrown German companies. But of course, Germany, there are no slackers in pharmaceutical companies. So what's your sense of what's happening there? And are existing pharmaceutical companies, established ones, in Germany, and I presume the Swiss as well, looking to grow their cannabis-related businesses over the next 5 years?
Yeah. Well, I think this is a very, very good question because first, I think what is sometimes not properly understood is when entering the German or the European market that you are dealing in the pharma area. It is a pharmaceutical, full stop. You need to communicate like a pharmaceutical company. You need to prepare yourself as a pharmaceutical company. And this is sometimes what I see is lacking. So you're coming more with a recreational mindset, and this is
A
sometimes not
branding
really
mindset
successful.
rather than a pure pharmaceutical
Exactly.
mindset.
Exactly. And this is not the case, when you have a magistral preparation, there is no branding on that. But I think nevertheless, there are a lot of chances to establish your business. And but maybe you shall look, as we say, when you're in Rome, do as the Romans do. And when you're in Europe, maybe try the European way
Right.
instead
That's
of
always a little bit
trying to
difficult for North
convince
Americans.
everybody about the US way.
Yes, well, yes, I think that's
It's
always,
not well perceived by the regulators.
yeah, they do find that difficult, and I think they may be finding that even a little bit more difficult in the upcoming years. There's a change of the change of administration there. I would suggest it makes them feel that they can even do more things the American way. But those who go to Europe pretty soon learn their lessons, don't they?
Exactly, but you might also find a lot of charming opportunities because please consider that Europe has a social healthcare system, and this is also offering tremendous chances, to place a product and to follow the situation. Because you say, well, we have, of course, less German or European growers because this was simply, I think, not in our genetics. And we learned, from abroad. I think many companies who are bringing excellent quality products, starting from Canada, US, but also Colombia, and now from Australia. I think we learn a lot, and we are very happy to partner on that. And I think here a lot of good companies catched up. And I do not see pharmaceutical business growing their own products because we also do not grow, I don't know, feed our own chickens or whatever. I think we are looking for a more, let me say, escalated versions on that from a pharmaceutical perspective, because, as I say, our competence is in dealing with a quality defined recipe, which is always replicable and has no kind of out of specifications, etc. So this is, I think, how we are dealing from a pharmaceutical business with products. So we need to, I think the companies need to get to a point where they have a very sustainable quality. And this is something which is ongoing. And of course, we are dealing with pharmaceutical administrations. I think this is something where we understand also easier our competence instead of looking at things which are maybe not the competence from the pharmaceutical industry. So I can very much imagine that at a stage where maybe the discussion is less on prices, but more on quality, pharmaceutical industry is attracted. It started already. There are several pharmaceutical companies already involved in the cannabis business. But I think there's much more homework to do and to understand, because companies now selling and trying to underbeat, on prices have cannot create any kind of accruals. So how do they want to go through a registration process, which will be sooner or later a discussion in Europe, so that you have to bring a pharmaceutical presentation. But if you have nothing in your pocket to do so, but just doing spot sales, I think this is not really a good idea to come then to Europe. You have to have a vision, or you have to partner with companies who have a vision, because in Europe, or definitely in Germany, we have a high expertise in pharmaceuticals. And I think here you have to find a way to talk to the right people and then develop products, because we know that the product is tremendously efficient. We see it, and I think also convinced by the BfArM survey, which is the Federal Drug and Medical Device Institute in Germany, who had a survey of more than 5 years. The results were really excellent for the industry. So I think here are a lot of things to pick it up. I know that always the patent is an issue, but if you create a product, you might not be related to any kind of patents of the seeds or a plant, but you are developing a product which has a standalone situation. So I just can encourage to look into that, because we have, I think, about 40, 50 indications. You just can pick it up and look where you see your chances that your product can fulfill that. And then you really reach the glory days, because you have then a sustainable pharmaceutical development, you have patients, you have loyal patients for years, and then you establish your business. And I think to encourage really people is it has been never so easy to enter the pharmaceutical industry as it is now with the cannabis situation. Because before, we need like 800 millions, we need 12 years of research, and then we maybe get a ticket for one compound.
Yeah.
And then you have 5, 6 years to recover your investments. And now you are able with a double-digit million, to enter this industry and to establish a sustainable business, to have patients which you are care for. And I think also this kind of patient caring would be very important as an attitude. If you feel that, then I think you are right. And any other, let me say, quick business, import, export will not be rewarded by a great development of your turnover.
Yes, well, that does, that, because for me, that's currently the issue in medical cannabis. Australia is a perfect example. It's these import-export markets that sort of bypass government because government gave them a loophole. It sort of happens to some extent in Europe. It happens, I think, far too much in Australia, and it's sort of growing in the UK as well. So, I agree with you totally that it's all about long-term partnerships and building medical products in this side of the market anyway, that are, as long-lasting, hopefully, as an aspirin.
Exactly. And this is here you're building up not only a business for 2, 3 years or 5 years and always thinking about how to exit with multi-million in your pocket.
Yeah.
I think here you are building up something for generations. And I think this has a much bigger charm than the other one.
So, I mean, that's a perfect segue into your hat as the founder of the European Medical Cannabis Association. How do they understand this in Brussels at the moment? Because I can't get a sense of this at all. Obviously, Germany is stepping ahead, shall we say. The UK, of course, is doing its own thing very badly. The Spanish and the Italians don't know which way to step. And some of the smaller countries, like the Czech Republic, and Switzerland are very quietly treading their own paths. How does Brussels bring all this together and understand it? Are they trying to understand it?
Well, not at present. I think at present where the problems with the European war here, I think the energy crisis also took a lot of resources for that. So let me say cannabis was really not on the prime list of the first 10 bullet points. But nevertheless, what we are doing is an association, and maybe I might be able to mention that it is not an industry association. It is also let me say, a one voice association. So
That's very good to hear. I'm not
also patient
I'm not normally a big
organization.
fan of industry associations.
Yeah, maybe there's some issue why. And no, for me, it was important that we have a one voice and also listening to each other, because this has been successful for all my life, is to understand the position of the other in order to make the right decisions and to go jointly forward and not, being ruled out by, being manipulated, between the parties. And I think here we have all one joint target, which is the access for patients who need it. I'm strongly recommending that this is a decision of the treating doctor and nobody else. And this is why I'm a little bit confused that in UK you have to search for an expert to have a 10 minutes appointment who is then deciding if you might have access to a medication or not, which is not applicable to any other kind of drug situation. And also you don't have only marketed drug, you have a lot of magistral preparations or compounding where, it's also solved in another way. And
it's a very UK fix to ensure
I think it's a very
that certain investors earn their
policy.
money back, I think is the shortcut.
Yeah, but don't you think also this is more a kind of like cost containment measure? So if I don't nobody gets access, nobody has to pay for it. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I just find the UK it's a bit like Australia. It was started by specific governments on one side of politics, and it allowed access to very few people to develop inverted commas an industry, and then but obviously they wouldn't take it to either parliaments to make some proper legislation, so they fudged rules that ensured that those companies could prosper either as suppliers to the domestic market, or in some cases, especially in the UK, very efficient exporters, although you never really know where they're sending half their product. And then that gets bedded down, and industry or a sector develops that is designed around share price and investor returns, with a lot of language on top about wellness and doing the best for patients. And there's plenty of people in both industries, in both countries, I believe, who are trying to do the right thing, but they've been given virtually zero legislative framework, but they have to deal with government departments who for 6 months might be feeling very positive, or been suggested that they just have not pushed back on certain things, and then as soon as somebody somewhere decides that those government departments need to tighten up because somebody always tries to mess with the existing system, so there's the people who suffer the most, of course, are the people who are paying lots of money for products that they need really for real medical issues, not as in Australia. A lot of the time, a lot of it is I can't sleep, or I've got a bad back, or my toe hurts. But in terms of people who really need medical products, they seem in both those jurisdictions to me to be the ones that suffer the most, because especially if you talk about the classic issue of children and seizures, those products are priced way beyond most people's affordability. And there was a debate in the UK House only 10 days ago, where this government, the current government, the Labour government, said really nothing different to the prior government. They've inherited a system and they don't intend to change it. That is exactly the same on the other side of the world, in Australia at the moment. So this is why I'm sort of interested in Europe, to ask you if Brussels are, but from what I hear you saying, it seems that they are really sitting in the, it's too hard and we don't want to tackle it boat, because there's lots of other very important things going on. But at some point, somebody has to talk about it. I mean, interestingly, the Ukraine is I mean, you probably know much more than me about it. What about the Ukraine's discussion to introduce a proper medical system into the country? Are they doing that as a revenue raiser, or does it just look good on paper? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think from the Ukrainian side, the situation is that they are in urgent demand to find solutions for their army soldiers who came back traumatic, very traumatic, etc. And I think they need a form of medication which is easy to access and to get a healing now. They don't have a time, to establish now long-term regulatory processes, because they perfectly see that they have an issue now and not in 5 years.
Yeah.
So they have to be now very pragmatic, and I think this is why they went this path. But also other countries tried to establish, and I'm looking, like for Portugal, who prepared, an authorization process, which is not requesting the clinical part, but you can support on a bibliographical way. And also France, of course, moving, let me say, a little bit slower.
Yeah.
But also they are ready to establish, let me say, a pragmatic registration process. And this is, of course, what we